starts with the main event, who did completely rise to the occasion. Tom Aspinall in the main event gets the submission win over Alexander Volkov in round 1. Dominic, this came pretty easy for Tom Aspinall, to be honest with you. We knew it wasn't an easy matchup on paper, but he made it look pretty easy. He seemed to get the better of the exchanges on the feet. He got the takedown when he needed it and got the submission pretty quickly. Your thoughts on Tom Aspinall's performance, and then afterwards you can talk about maybe what's next for him.
Yeah, I mean, what a flawless performance, truthfully, to go in there after only having, 4 fights in the UFC and to do that to Alexander Volkov. He hadn't been submitted, I don't believe, since 2010, if I'm not mistaken. So just crazy that a guy, 28 years old, his 5th fight in the UFC, goes in and does that to such a seasoned veteran, a former Bellator champion, all the rest of it. So what a performance to do that in his home crowd in London. Was just absolutely amazing, man. And to get a submission like that, I saw you peek in the bottom.
I forgot that my audio's on there. I was trying to look something up.
I was trying not to pop in and laugh. Anyways, but it was awesome. I knew I made a personal tweet out on Twitter about how I knew from the second I saw him in 2020 debut, he was going to be something special, but this was just the encapsulating moment. Noah, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when he becomes the UFC heavyweight champion, in my opinion. I think that performance solidified it. I can't wait to see what's next. And if we're getting right into that, he did say, Noah, after the fight, there's a guy, a fellow beer drinker, that he respects a lot and loves watching fight, Mr. Bam Bam Tai Tuivasa, who I still can't believe is in title contention. What a roar that man has had. And I cannot, or I would say I'd be lying if I said that fight doesn't tickle my fancy.
Yeah, I tend to, when you made that statement, that proclamation or declaration about Tom Aspinall being a future champion, that you pretty much dug your heels in the, I don't know what you call it, dug your heels in the sand or whatever, and basically said, I'm dying on this hill.
Yes.
That's not something you do very much. You don't really go out there on a limb, and you have been a day one Tom Aspinall rider. Obviously the people from Europe are the ones that find these guys first. Yeah. I mean, that's how we find out about these guys before they're even that far along in their development, is because that whole area, that whole part of the world is so dedicated to these fighters and so loyal, and they build these guys up and make them look larger than life. You saw it multiple times on this card. But I would say outside of those people, you were like one of the first ones to really say Tom Aspinall has title potential.
Yeah.
I was a little bit reluctant to just like come out for that, but he's passed every test and he's done it in a way that is impressive, both equally impressive and also allows us to understand more of his game.
Yes.
Even though he's not usually in the octagon very long, his wins over Arlovsky and then here over Volkov, you're learning stuff about him, his ground game, how well-rounded he really is. He did call out Tai Tuivasa. Now, there was a rumor going around. We didn't address it on the show, but that the UFC were looking at putting Tai Tuivasa and Stipe Miocic for the interim heavyweight title this summer. Now, I think the reason why we didn't talk about it is because, one, we didn't really see any real verifiable source reporting it, but also because I just don't think me and you really believed it was going to happen.
No.
I believe Tai Tuivasa would take that fight, but Stipe, and I'm not saying that I agree with this viewpoint from him, but I really think Stipe wants the Ngannou fight or the Jones fight.
Yeah, that's
it. I don't think he's really budging on anything else.
Right.
So I think we both kind of wanted to believe Stipe versus John Jones would happen this summer. And while there's still probably a chance for that, the fact that, like, anytime it's come up, Dana's like, no, I haven't talked to either guy.
Yeah.
I know maybe there is something going on behind the scenes. Maybe one of the matchmakers is talking to these guys. maybe Dana's just lying. I don't know. It's not like he hasn't lied before. I mean, the guy, he has to do what he's got to do.
Mm-hmm.
But it wouldn't surprise me if that fight really the UFC isn't really thinking that fight's going to happen. So what started as Stipe versus Jones, Dom, might end up being Tom Aspinall versus Tai Tuivasa in the end. Some people would look at that and go, that's disappointing because Stipe, John Jones, big stars, that's a legacy fight.
Yeah.
But Dominic, would I be out of line to say that Aspinall versus Tuivasa for an interim heavyweight title is the fight that we should be rooting for to get made? Not because obviously we love Stipe,
Yes,
but let's be fair. Should John Jones really be fighting for the heavyweight title? Also, should he really be fighting in general right now? Is this the fight that we should be rooting for to get made?
That's an interesting viewpoint. I know you texted in the group chat and were like, "Hey, this could be the interim title fight." And I don't hate it. Obviously, I actually love it. I love Aspinall. I love Boom Boom, Bam Bam Tai Tuivasa. And look, when you look at actually like what they're doing, look at the win streaks, and they're beating top competition. Like the argument, regardless of what the number next to their name says, if you look at the accolades, they're the two guys in the division with the biggest win streaks, Noah, and they're all via finish. When you put it that way, how can you not justify that being for the interim title fight?
And I guess not just to harp on the John Jones stuff, but on the Stipe side, he's coming off a loss, a one-sided loss to the champion.
Yeah.
I've already told you multiple times on this show, I've made it very clear I don't love getting immediate rematches. Well, this wouldn't be an immediate rematch, but he'd be immediately getting another title fight. And, truthfully, he probably should have to win another one.
Right.
He probably should have to beat like a Curtis Blades or
maybe
one of these. Yeah. And then be back in the title picture. But, I mean, again, Stipe John Jones is obviously the fight that we've all been like rooting for to happen. But I'm almost like tired of talking about it. And once this Aspinall Tuivasa fight has kind of popped up now, I'm very content with just going in that direction. And I really don't feel any sort of disappointment with that. I don't feel like I'm settling, which is a very strange feeling because we've been talking about Stipe versus Jones for multiple years now.
Yeah.
It's a good play. It's honestly a good place to be in. Like, I feel like I have almost, I feel like Stipe versus Jones was like a ex-girlfriend, and I'm finally like over her.
You're right.
And now I got my new girl, Aspinall versus Tuivasa.
I love that.
Logistically speaking, apparently the plan right now, there's 2 cards in July.
Yeah.
One is the first week of July, and one's like the last week of July. The first week of July card, which would be UFC 276.
Yep, International Fight Week.
Is International Fight Week. I believe the plan is for one of those, and I think the first week card is supposed to be headlined by Kamaru Usman versus Leon Edwards.
Yeah.
And then the one at the end of the month is supposed to be headlined by Israel Adesanya versus Jared Cannonier. That's the plan as I've understood it.
Okay.
If you had Stipe versus Tuivasa, or Stipe versus Jones, or Stipe versus Aspinall, I don't think you put Stipe in the co-main event.
No, you can't.
You look at the way the UFC's always done things. They for a while there, they had that rule where it was like the heaviest champion was always at the top of the card, which is kind of weird. It's a weird rule to make. Just put your biggest star up there.
Yeah.
But I don't think you should put an interim title necessarily over the undisputed title. But I don't see Stipe being the co-main event below Kamaru Usman.
I see where you're going.
That's why I think you do the interim title between Aspinall, Tuivasa. That's your co-main event. That's a perfect co-main event because neither of those two guys, even though they both have a lot of potential, Tuivasa's really made a name for himself. Aspinall's still trying to really work his way into the casual fan base.
Yep.
There's not a lot of pressure on them to carry the pay-per-view.
Right.
So that's probably the biggest reason. It fits. It's a more perfect puzzle piece to fit right there on the co-main event.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I like where your head's at, Noah. It really does. When you break it down and look at the state of this division, that's the fight that truthfully makes the most sense with our current sitting champion, Francis Ngannou, out for, 9 to 12 months.
Now, let me ask you this question before we move on. There's
Mhm.
one fighter who we haven't even really mentioned so far. You just brought up Ngannou, how he's out for 9 months. That's kind of the reason why we think an interim title is going to be introduced. I believe we talked about that on Friday
Yeah.
or Thursday, excuse me. Ciryl Gane,
Yeah.
who did lose the title fight in January. He's a former interim champion. Is there a chance that he could be brought into this mix, or do you think that the momentum riding with Aspinall and Tuivasa and the fact that they are on such win streaks is enough to kind of keep him out of the picture, at least for this fight we're talking about? Because I've seen a lot of people making the argument that, well, isn't Aspinall versus Gane the more competitive fight on paper?
Okay. So I'm actually glad you brought this up because I was going to send a text. I actually had the text, believe it or not, typed out to send in our group, and I did not send it. As Tom was walking to the cage, I was going to say, if he beats Volkov here, and specifically, I was going to say, I think like if he walks through him, I can't wait to see Aspinall versus Gane, Paris versus London, the Battle of Europe. That's a massive, very big fight. The future, the next wave of talent in the heavyweight division. And that's what I was going to say. But I held back on it. And lucky I did because he called out Tai Tuivasa, Tom, that is. And I love everything about that fight. So, yes, Gane can throw his hat, in play here. He can. But I think if you can delay the Tom versus Ciryl Gane fight just a little bit, maybe Gane gets one more win. Say, Aspinall does fight Tuivasa and beats him. I just think there's a time and place where that fight could be absolutely massive for the UK, for Europe, for MMA in that region. So, yes, Gane can make noise, but I think the UFC will side with Tuivasa and Aspinall and long play Tom versus Gane. That's where my head's at.
I like that a lot. And even if Aspinall were to lose that fight to Tuivasa, that could always be a fight night headliner in London
True.
or
Yes.
in one of those different areas over in Europe. So
Yep.
that could be there's a lot of fun matchups here in the future that I could see playing out. It's just nice to have a heavyweight division that feels like this.
100%, man.
And it's so crazy that we're this excited about the prospects and the potential of this division when your champion's out right now for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
The the former best heavyweight of all time hasn't fought in a year and doesn't seem all that keen on coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the maybe best fighter of all time at light heavyweight looking to move up, but he hasn't fought in 2 years and has had obviously more troubles outside the octagon. So he's kind of been radio silent. So you would be shocked to feel like this division is doing so well when you have those three things going against it. But I like where it's at. And obviously next weekend you have the headliner in the heavyweight division. I know a lot of people aren't like super thrilled on Blades versus Dawkins, but I do think there's a chance that the winner of that fight gets a matchup with like a Ciryl Gane next. So
Yeah.
it's not necessarily going to have a bunch of implications immediately, but obviously the winner will get a pretty big fight following up, I think.
Right.
That was